This is Christian Gomez with the New American Magazine, and today with us on the program, live coming to us from Salt Lake City, is William F. Jasper, the executive editor of the New American Magazine, who's covering the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference. Bill, glad to have you today on the program again. How's it going down there in Salt Lake?
Well, it's going pretty well. I'm here at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City. It's a huge complex. You can see over my shoulder there the grand ballroom, the sign above it. This is the emblems of the Civil Society Summit. They just finished a major program in there where they are putting together what they call the outcome document, which is essentially what their organization is going to be, the UN is going to be promoting for civil society, their declaration of what they are trying to accomplish here in the 3-day conference.
So typically they'll present that on the last day as sort of, this is what we've achieved in the 3 days or so we've been here.
Right, but in truth, this, as with all of the UN conferences
of course,
summits, these have been going on for weeks and actually months. And all the text has been worked and reworked. And then they bring together all the players here at the events like this or at the UN summits, and they put them in a pressure cooker, and the organizers try to make it appear that this is a very transparent operation of the people, a grassroots effort by people coming to a consensus. In truth, having been at so many of these over the years, what happens is the very well-organized left-wing organizations, the NGOs, who make up the leadership of what they call civil society, have already pre-programmed what they want the outcome document to state. And then their whole process is bringing in lots of different activists from all different parts of the world and all different supposed sectors of society, proclaiming that this is what the people of the world want. Always pushing for more government, bigger government, more centralization of power, more regulation of all areas of our lives. And that's going to be, of course, a very big part of this conference. This conference is actually a program geared up to put forward a bunch of activists, a rent-a-mob, next month in New York City at the United Nations Summit on universal health care, and simultaneously they're having a summit on climate action.
So this isn't a standalone conference. This is part of a series of ongoing UN conferences that deal with a whole host of topics to essentially impose socialism under nice-sounding names and platitudes, right?
Exactly, and this is a very important development that has come along. We began to see this first at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992.
In which you were at and covered.
I was there, and there were 40, 50,000 people, delegates and NGOs, civil society so-called there. But that was different. They were just organizing this movement then, and they didn't actually bring them into the official UN summit. They had what they called a People's Summit outside, and they brought all of these different groups in, including many radical socialists, communists, radical environmentalist groups. This was back in '92, before the LGBTQ forces had really been organized, but they still had them back then. They brought all these different organizations there, and then they agitated outside of the conference and had all kinds of news events, etc., to build pressure to push the official delegates inside more in the collectivist direction. Well, something then happened in 1998, 6 years later, in Rome at the International Criminal Court Summit. They actually brought the People's Summit inside the official conference. And so you had all of these professional agitators and students and young people brought inside to where they would actually hold demonstrations, block the traffic inside the hallways, and collar people, delegates, and put pressure on them. And they've been doing that ever since. They've been perfecting this.
Isn't that what they call sort of a stakeholders conference?
These are what they call the stakeholders. These are supposed, which is really built on the Soviet system. The stakeholder concept is really the old Soviet. The Soviets were groups that supposedly represented the workers, the peasants, the doctors, the students. And that's where we get the Union of Soviets.
They represent the supposed various interests of the people throughout society. And by them being there, it gives a sort of facade or legitimacy to the what's being demanded, correct?
Right. So it gives this full vox populi, the false voice of the people. And I see we're getting a bunch of sunlight coming through the new solarium here. But
that's very green of the UN.
Yes. So, I mean, this is what we can expect today. We just heard inside here that Salt Lake City and Utah are going to become zero emission spaces by 2050, I think they said. Zero emissions. So I don't know how they're going to accomplish that. Even the top scientists haven't yet said they can come up with zero emissions.
Hasn't presidential candidate Joe Biden vowed to accomplish the same if elected? Probably the other Democrats as well running for president. Which leads me to a question, with the election coming so soon, why is this conference being held in Salt Lake City of all places? Typically these are held in New York City or somewhere in Europe or perhaps sometimes somewhere in Asia. But why Salt Lake City in the heartland of America? What is so symbolic about choosing this location for this particular conference at this time?
Well, this is a very important question and a very important point you bring up. This is the first time outside of New York City that we've held a civil society summit in another city in the United States. There have been several others in other parts of the world, but this is the first time here in the United States. And that point was made by several of the speakers this morning, one of whom is the mayor of Salt Lake, Jackie Biskupski. And she, of course, is a very important cog in this whole wheel. She is the mayor, and she is the first open lesbian mayor of Salt Lake City. And most people say Salt Lake City, that's a very conservative town, the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as Mormons. However, the ultra-left has been targeting this and other conservative areas throughout the country with very radical environmentalists, Antifa, Indivisible, all of the
various stakeholders.
Yes, all the various stakeholders, and the LGBT radicals. And so she was able to get the support of key financial resources, and she got in as mayor and immediately pushed forward on all of these different areas, using as a fulcrum and leverage all of the colleges and universities in the state. And that's what we see over and over again with these efforts to undermine conservative areas, particularly in the western states, using all of the shock troops of the Marxist-occupied college and university campuses. And that's very evident here at the event this week.
Okay, so we're running low on time. We've got a little over a minute left. Can you tell us what we expect to come out of this conference, or any other final thoughts you'd like to get in there before we have to wrap up?
Yeah, so right in the very first two sentences of the Declaration draft document, they state that this is to put forward the 2030 agenda. The 2030 agenda is the update of Agenda 21, which came out of the 1992 Earth Summit, which was then codified in the Millennium Development Goals at the Millennium Summit in New York City in 2000. That went until 2015. In 2015, they came up with another 15-year project, which is 2030. So this is, again, going back to very much like we see in communist China or in the Soviet Union, where they have 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plans. The United Nations, of course, being a total socialist and or communist organization, has been promoting these kinds of central planning, centralist, collectivist programs for a long time. And so 2030 agenda is the key document that they keep referring here and to here, and they use, of course, all the shibboleths, the catchwords of inclusivity, sustainability, uh, um, all of the other things about sustainable development, and all of those are very pliable terms which they can wrap around just about any kind of program, whether it's environmental, social, economic, political, to concentrate more power, justify concentrating more power in government.
Okay, thank you, Bill. That's all the time we have on the program today. We'll check back with you again tomorrow for the latest update about what's going on in the conference. So, Bill, you take care, stay safe, and we'll hear back from you again tomorrow.
Thank you, Kristen.